So once we have our cardinality figured out, the last step in fleshing out the relationships at this stage is going to be our optionality. So we're going to see if, when we're talking about like a one-to-one relationship, if each side of those has to be one, or if it could also be zero. For the many side of the relationships, does it have to be one, or can it, or one or more, or can it be zero? So that's basically what we're just trying to figure out, if zero is an option for each of these. And so there's 4 different symbols that we're going to add to our diagram, which are the single line, double line, 0, and the line 0. And again, like before, we're just going to ask that question of each one. So for departments, how many employees does a department have to have? If a department has 0 employees, is it still a department? And these are probably business rules that you're going to have to check with your stakeholder just to make sure. But you know, you can use logic for a lot of it, right? So if a department has 0 employees, it's probably not going to exist. They'd probably get rid of the department, right? So it probably has to have at least 1. Employees have to be assigned to a department. You get hired into a department. And we know that they're only in one department. So for the department side, we want a 1 and only 1. For the employee side, we want at least 1. And you just do that process for each end of each of the lines. So each project is assigned to at least 1 department. Each department should have at least 1 project, probably. But we don't actually know. You know, it could actually be that, you know, would a maintenance department be assigned projects? So that's something that I would want to clarify with the department before I said that that they have to have at least 1. So these a lot of times when you're drafting these out are going to be your best guess. Thinking about those questions, go back to your stakeholder and ask them, basically. So each project or each employee should have at least 1 project. But what if they're new in that, you know, 2-week training period? Is it okay for them to have no projects during that time? Are all employees project-based? In a normal organization, probably not. All projects do need to have at least 1 employee if it's active, but if a project is deactivated, it finishes hopefully, are the employees unassigned, or are they left on the thing as like, you know, those employees are knowledgeable about it? What happens when employees leave the company? You know, those are all sorts of questions you should be asking, so you know what the data is going to do in the long run. Dependents is a little bit easier. Each employee definitely does not need to have a dependent, and they could have multiple. Each dependent does have to have at least 1 guardian in the company, though. That one's pretty easy. So if an employee leaves, the data on their dependent will also leave, because there's no reason to keep data on a dependent if they don't have anyone that's connected to them in the organization. Cool. So once you get comfortable with that, at this stage, you should be able to take a simple scenario like the business rules at the beginning of this section. You should be able to map it out and produce a diagram with, you know, you have our rectangular entities, we have lines between them, figure out if they're one-to-manys, many-to-manys, and whatnot, and their cardinality and their optionality. Likewise, you should be able to read a simple enterprise data model and figure out the business rules from looking at that example.